So not only has this guy directed probably the most famous Christmas horror movie of all time, probably the most famous family Christmas movie of all time, but he's also probably directed the worst movie of all time. Alright, as per recommendation from TS in the comments section, I'm reviewing Black Christmas. So this is a first time watch for me. I've never actually seen this movie, but I'm obviously well aware of the impact that it had and, just how popular it is in general. It's probably the most famous Christmas horror movie of all time. It definitely came out at a time before it was really a trend. It came out really before slashers were a trend, honestly. It came out the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so that tells you something. And honestly, I enjoyed it. It's not going to have the impact on me that it would if I were to watch it in 1974 or seen it at the time that it was released or seen it before I've seen so many other horror movies. I think if I caught this at an earlier age, it probably would have been more effective for me because to no fault of its own, I have just seen so many of these tropes before, but it's to no fault of the movie because it's the movie that originated it. But that doesn't take away from my enjoyment because this is an incredibly well-made horror movie. And the first thing that I really want to compliment it on is that it's very restrained and it likes to keep everything going on in a level of ambiguity. Some horror movies ruin the scares by just showing too much or just being too bombastic. They don't know how to hold back or cut in the reins, but this movie really wants to hide its cards from you and keep you guessing the entire time. It also has some pretty effective scares. I was a little bit taken aback by just how creepy the phone calls are. I wasn't really expecting it to be that actually creepy. I didn't really expect to actually be a little bit creeped out by what was going on in the movie. I thought that I would enjoy it, but probably enjoy it more from like an appreciation standpoint. I was kind of thinking that I'd have a hard time actually getting into it just because I'm so far removed from that time. And I've also just seen so many horror movies that whatever it started wouldn't affect me. But there are moments in this movie that I found pretty effective, and I really got to give it props for that. I didn't think the characters were the greatest, but I could get into their story alright and just kind of enjoy what they were going through and kind of just getting invested in the story. Of course, it's always great to see John Saxon as a cop, but that's just a small detail that I really enjoyed. Unfortunately, though, I think that this is a movie that I am going to keep a little bit at arm's length, and it's, again, just to no fault of its own, but, I was born 25 years after this movie came out. I've seen a lot of horror movies, and I just never caught this one. So, unfortunately, my viewing is kind of tainted by all the copycats. The thing is, this movie is the one that started a lot of things that I didn't even know it started. I mean, I remember being so creeped out the first time I heard the urban legend about the babysitter getting the calls, and then when she calls the cops and they trace it, it turns out that the call's coming from inside the house. That is a concept that just freaked me out when I first read it, but that's a concept that came from this movie, and because I've just heard it all, seen all the tropes, all the things that were probably revolutionized by this movie, it just doesn't affect me as much, and it's, again, to no fault of its own. And unfortunately, that just doesn't give me the prime viewing. But I can still recognize, though, that this movie is the one that deserves the credit for everything that it started. And it's still, even on its own, a very enjoyable, entertaining, and pretty creepy movie. I'd actually be interested in checking out the remake, and I don't know if I can, the 2019 movie. I've heard only absolutely terrible things, so I don't know if I want to waste an hour and a half of my time, but maybe I'll give it a check. But that's my review for Black Christmas. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a Merry Christmas or whatever you celebrate. Enjoy and have a good one.